Karen Whitfield was mid-lecture when the first water balloon exploded against her designer blouse. The second caught her perfectly coiffed blonde bob, and the third, a massive blue orb, struck her clipboard, sending her carefully organized swim class schedule flying into the community pool. "Who did this?" she shrieked, mascara streaming down her cheeks as she spun in circles, searching for the culprit. The royal parents seated in lounge chairs stared back in stunned silence, the children treading water in the pool, none of whom were actually residents of Sunnyside Estates, froze mid-splash. Even Mrs. Peterson's yappy Pomeranian stopped its incessant barking to witness Karen's meltdown. This was not how Karen had envisioned the grand opening of Karen's Kicks and Kiddos Swim Academy, operated out of the Sunnyside Estates community pool that she had commandeered 3 weeks ago through what residents now referred to as the clipboard coup. The truth was, no one had seen who threw the water balloons. One moment Karen was explaining her new pool usage schedule that allowed actual homeowners a mere 2 hours of swim time per day, and the next, splash, splash, splash. The saboteur had vanished like a phantom, leaving only the echo of Karen's shrieks and the mysterious calling card of water balloons. "This is assault," Karen declared, stomping her soaked wedge sandals on the concrete. "I'm calling an emergency HOA meeting right now." Technically, Karen wasn't even on the HOA board. She was the self-appointed Aquatic Facilities Coordinator, a title she had printed on business cards after moving into the neighborhood 6 months ago and immediately deciding that the community's amenities were being grossly mismanaged. "The meeting is scheduled for 7 p.m. sharp," she announced, dabbing her ruined blouse with a towel snatched from a nearby child. "Attendance is mandatory." Behind her back, parents exchanged glances. The revolution against Karen's tyranny had finally begun, and while no one would admit to launching the aquatic attack, plenty looked pleased about it. Charlie Mendez, a mild-mannered accountant who lived at Sunnyside for 12 years, caught Karen's eye and quickly looked away. His pool equipment shed had been mysteriously locked since yesterday, and the slight smile playing at the corner of his mouth suggested he might know more than he was letting on. "Class dismissed," Karen spat. "But tuition is on, read a few NDABL." As parents collected their disappointed children, Karen marched to her oversized tote bag and pulled out a fresh clipboard. She always carried a spare. With furious scratches of her pen, she began drafting new rules for the community pool. If someone thought they could water balloon their way out of her authority, they had another thing coming. "I'm going to find out who did this," she muttered, "and when I do, they'll wish they'd never moved to Sunnyside." Little did Karen know, the water balloons were just the beginning. Across the street, Charlie was already in his garage, mixing up a batch of something that would make Karen's swim academy plans sink faster than a bowling ball in the deep end. The neighborhood was fighting back, and they had strategies that would make Karen's unauthorized swim business freeze in its tracks, literally. 6 weeks earlier, Karen Whitfield had arrived at the Sunnyside Estates community meeting with a 3-ring binder, 17 color-coded tabs, and the determination of a seasoned dictator. Her husband Brad trailed behind, visibly uncomfortable in the pressed khakis she'd laid out for him that morning. "Our pool is an embarrassment," Karen announced without preamble, interrupting the HOA president mid-sentence about lawn height regulations. "I've compiled a 37-point action plan to transform our mediocre water feature into a world-class aquatic center." The room of 30 homeowners collectively sighed. They'd only met Karen 6 times, but already they understood that resistance was futile. She'd steamrolled the garden committee in her first week and reorganized the mailbox numbering system by her third. "Karen, we're discussing lawn maintenance right now," Arnold Peterson, the long-suffering HOA president, explained patiently. "Lawns can wait," Karen replied, slapping her binder on the table with such force that Arnold's coffee sloshed onto his meeting notes. "I'm a certified water aerobics instructor with advanced training in kiddie swim fundamentals. This community is sitting on an untapped gold mine." What she didn't mention was that her certification came from a weekend course at the YMCA, which she'd attended precisely twice before deciding she knew better than the instructor. "I moved to establish myself as Sunnyside Aquatic Director, effective immediately," Karen declared. "That's not a real position," Arnold protested weakly. "It is now," Karen said, sliding a pre-printed name placard across the table. "I've already ordered the sign for the pool entrance." By the end of that meeting, through a combination of filibustering, invoking obscure bylaws no one had energy to look up, and promising to handle all pool-related complaints, of which there were many, Karen had effectively seized control of the community's most coveted amenity. Within days, Karen's rules of aquatic enjoyment appeared on a laminated poster by the pool gate. Among them, no splashing, no diving, no flotation devices exceeding 24 inches, no food, no glass, no running, no music, no fun. But it was her latest scheme that pushed the neighborhood past its breaking point. 2 weeks after her takeover, glossy flyers appeared in local coffee shops advertising Karen's Kicks and Kiddos Swim Academy, with sessions at the Sunnyside pool running from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. daily, directly violating the age-old bylaw limiting commercial activity. "It's not a business," Karen explained when confronted by Arnold. "It's a community enrichment program that happens to require a $75 weekly enrollment fee." The real homeowners found themselves unable to use their own pool as Karen's clientele, none of whom lived in Sunnyside, took over the facilities. Complaints were met with Karen's clipboard and a verbal barrage about supporting local entrepreneurship. Charlie Mendez had been the first to suggest resistance. "She can't just take over our pool," he told neighbors during a secret meeting in his garage. "We paid for that amenity in our HOA dues. But what can we do?" asked Sheila Johnson, whose grandchildren had been kicked out of the pool for using water guns on their own property. Charlie's eyes had gleamed with mischief uncommon for an accountant. "I have some ideas," he said, pulling out his own much smaller notebook. "And they start with reminding Karen who really owns this neighborhood." The water balloon attack was just phase 1 of Charlie's plan. Phase 2 involved something much colder, calculated to hit Karen where it would hurt most, her unauthorized aqua business profits. Karen's emergency HOA meeting was a disaster, largely because she wasn't authorized to call one. Of the 74 households in Sunnyside Estates, only 11 people showed up, and 7 of those were there simply to witness the continuing drama unfold. "This community has a VNDL in its midst," Karen announced, pacing back and forth in front of a hastily created PowerPoint presentation titled Pool Terrorism, a KAC study. "Karen throwing water balloons is hardly terrorism," said Diane Peters, a retired elementary school principal who was one of the few neighbors willing to stand up to Karen. "It was a coordinated attack on a community business," Karen fired back. "The business that's explicitly forbidden by our HOA bylaws," Charlie pointed out quietly from the back row. "Section 4, paragraph 7 clearly states no commercial enterprises may operate using shared amenities without board approval and appropriate insurance riders." Karen's face flushed. She didn't know Charlie was a former insurance adjuster before becoming an accountant. "I have a way IVR system," she snapped, though the stack of photocopied papers she waved was clearly downloaded from a free legal template website. The meeting deteriorated when Karen demanded they form a special investigation committee with her as chairperson. Arnold Peterson, summoning rare courage, denied the motion on procedural grounds. Karen stormed out, vowing to handle the situation personally. The next morning, Karen arrived at the pool at 6 a.m. to set up for her first class, only to find the entire pool encrusted with a thin layer of ice. "What in the name of?" she shrieked, rushing to the water's edge. Despite it being July in Arizona, the pool surface was frozen solid. Not enough to walk on, but enough to make swimming impossible. Karen immediately called the pool maintenance company. "Ma'am, I've never seen anything like this," said George, the maintenance man who arrived 30 minutes later. "It's 89 degrees out. Pools don't just freeze." "Well, this one did," Karen snapped, jabbing her finger at the icy surface. "Fix it." "We'll need to drain and refill," George explained. "That's at least 3 days." Karen nearly collapsed. 3 days of canceled classes meant thousands in lost revenue. Even worse, her reputation would be ruined. Her phone began buzzing with texts from swim class parents. Word had spread fast. Karen switched her phone to silent and stared at the frozen pool in disbelief. Across the street, Charlie sipped his morning coffee and watched the scene unfold through binoculars. The industrial cooling unit he'd rented and secretly installed in the pool equipment room during the night had worked perfectly. It had cost him $900, but watching Karen's face as she beheld her frozen business venture was worth every penny. "Phase 2 complete," he murmured into his phone. "Roger that," came Diane's reply, moving to Phase 3. At that moment, Karen noticed something embedded in the ice. Dozens of her laminated pool rules frozen like fossils throughout the surface. Her rules had been literally put on ice. The pool took 4 days to drain, thaw, clean, and refill. 4 days in which Karen's phone rang incessantly with angry swim clients demanding refunds. Her perfectly structured schedule was in ruins, and her promised guaranteed 6 sessions, or your money back clause was coming back to haunt her. "I can offer you a 50% discount on future classes," Karen repeated robotically into her phone for the 37th time that day. Her dining room table had been transformed into a crisis management center, with spreadsheets tracking canceled lessons and financial losses. Brad, Karen's husband, poked his head tentatively into the room. "Maybe this is a sign to let the pool thing go, honey. I mean, you already got your hands full with the neighborhood watch redesign and the mailbox color compliance initiative." Karen's glare could have frozen the newly refilled pool all over again. "This is sabotage, Brad. I don't give up when I'm being sabotaged. IESCLAT. Brad retreated, mumbling something about working late again. The truth was, he'd been spending more time at the office since Karen's neighborhood crusades began. Their neighbors had started giving him pitying looks at the mailbox. With the pool finally refilled, Karen implemented heightened security measures. She installed her own security cameras without HOA approval, hired her unemployed nephew to guard the pool equipment room, and created a sign-in sheet requiring photo ID for anyone entering the pool area. The ice incident was clearly the work of someone who knows pool equipment, she told her nephew Dylan, a 26-year-old whose primary qualifications were owning a folding chair and being willing to work for below minimum wage. "Sure, Aunt Karen," Dylan replied, not looking up from his phone game. "I'll keep an eye out for suspicious pool people." Karen's swim academy reopened with a vengeance. She doubled down on her control of the pool, extending her business hours and reducing community swim time to a single hour at dawn. She raised her rates to recover her losses and introduced mandatory water safety seminars that residents had to attend before using their own pool. The rebellion, however, was just warming up. On the first day of resumed classes, Karen arrived to find every poolside lounge chair had been superglued in the upright position. On day 2, the pool was fine, but every bathroom in the clubhouse had out-of-order signs, though strangely, they all worked perfectly when tested. On day 3, the pool water turned a bright but harmless shade of purple that stained the expensive swimsuits of Karen's premium clients. Each incident was minor enough to prevent any legitimate legal action, but disruptive enough to send Karen into increasingly spectacular meltdowns, which Charlie's wife Laura diligently recorded from behind her sunglasses for the neighborhood group chat. "She's going to crack," Charlie predicted during the latest secret neighborhood meeting, now held in Diane's basement to avoid detection. "But we need something bigger to finally make her give up the pool." "What about her clipboard?" suggested Mrs. Abernathy, the 80-year-old neighborhood gossip. "She treats that thing like it's the nuclear football." A slow smile spread across Charlie's face. "Mrs. Abernathy, you're a genius. Karen without her clipboard is like Samson without his hair." The plan they hatched that night would target the very essence of Karen's power, her meticulously organized systems. If they couldn't freeze her out of business, they would drown her in administrative chaos. Meanwhile, Karen was implementing her own countermeasures, unaware that her greatest vulnerability wasn't the pool at all. It was her desperate need for control. The administrative assault began on a Tuesday. Karen arrived at the pool to find her carefully arranged sign-in sheets replaced with Mad Libs pages. Her rules poster had been swapped with one that looked identical at first glance but contained absurd regulations like no swimming without first performing the hokey pokey, and all swimmers must address lifeguards as your chlorinated majesty. "Dylan," she screamed, but her nephew was nowhere to be found. Later, she would discover him asleep in the supply closet, the mysterious $50 bill in his pocket. Karen frantically restored order, but by the time her first class arrived, she was already frazzled. Mrs. Kessler, whose twins were in the intermediate class, handed Karen an envelope. "What's this?" Karen asked, already dreading another cancellation. "It's an invoice," Mrs. Kessler replied coolly, "for the purple stains on Madison and Mason's competition swimsuits, plus emotional distress." Before Karen could respond, 3 more parents approached with similar envelopes. By lunchtime, she had received invoices totaling over $2,000. "This is HARASSMENT," Karen declared, clutching her clipboard to her chest like armor. "No, it's capitalism," replied Mr. Jimenez, whose daughter's blonde hair now had a distinctly lavender tint. "You're running a business, we're your customers, and you've damaged our property." Karen retreated to the pool office to strategize. Her clipboard, her precious command center, contained all the ammunition she needed to fight back: payment records, attendance sheets, signed liability waivers. With these documents, she could prove the parents had assumed all risks. But when she opened her clipboard, she found only blank pages where her documents should have been. The blood drained from Karen's face, her records, her precious records, gone. A note was paperclipped to the inside cover. "Looking for something? Maybe check the lost and found." Karen sprinted to the community lost and found bin, a large plastic container near the clubhouse entrance. Inside, she found hundreds of pages, her pages, shredded into confetti and mixed with pool noodle bits. She dropped to her knees, desperately trying to piece together fragments of waivers and payment records, but it was hopeless. Decades of administrative prowess had taught Karen one thing: without documentation, she had no power. What she didn't know was that Charlie had made copies of all her documents before shredding them, evidence of her unauthorized business activities that would be devastating in the hands of the actual AHOA board. When Karen's afternoon class arrived, she found herself unable to prove who had paid and who hadn't. Parents claimed they'd already submitted payments that Karen couldn't verify. New students insisted they'd already completed waivers. Her meticulous system was in shambles. Perhaps you should take a few days off to reorganize, suggested Diane, who had coincidentally stopped by the pool. You seem overwhelmed. Karen's eye twitched. I don't get overwhelmed. I overwhelm others. But her voice lacked conviction. For the first time since moving to Sunnyside Estates, Karen Whitfield felt control slipping away. Without her documentation, her business was vulnerable. Without her rules, her authority was questionable. That night, she stayed up until 3 a.m. recreating her records from memory, fueled by righteous indignation and alarming amounts of boxed wine. This wasn't just about a swim business anymore. This was war. They think they can break me, she muttered as she aggressively three-hole punched fresh pages. They have no idea who they're dealing with. Across the neighborhood, the resistance watched and waited. Phase 3 had worked better than expected. Karen was rattled, making mistakes, getting sloppy. But Charlie knew from experience. But corner Karen was a dangerous Karen. The final phase would need to be flawless. The neighborhood had underestimated Karen's capacity for escalation. 2 days after the clipboard catastrophe, residents received an official-looking letter that sent shockwaves through Sunnyside Estates. Dear valued community member, it began innocuously enough. Due to recent vandalism at our community pool, the Sunnyside HOA board has authorized an emergency assessment of $500 per household for security upgrades and damages. The letter was signed Karen Whitfield, acting HOA president. Arnold Peterson's phone exploded with calls. I didn't authorize this, he protested to anyone who would listen. She's not even president. I'm still president. But the damage was done. Several residents had already written checks, intimidated by the threatening language about liens being placed on non-compliant properties. Karen had gone nuclear. Charlie called an emergency resistance meeting. She's forging HOA documents now, he told the assembled neighbors in Diane's basement. That's actually illegal. We should call the police, suggested Mr. Abernathy. Not yet, Charlie cautioned. If we involve authorities, this whole thing becomes much uglier for everyone. We need to get her to incriminate herself so thoroughly that she'll have no choice but to back down. The next morning, Karen arrived at the pool to find it surrounded by yellow caution tape and a professionally printed sign, closed by order of Maricopa County Health Department, biological contamination. Karen's heart nearly stopped. Health department closure would mean weeks of shutdown, thousands in certification fees, and the absolute end of her swim academy. She frantically dialed the number on the sign. Maricopa Health, Pool Compliance, answer a stern female voice. This is Karen Whitfield from Sunnyside Estates, Karen said breathlessly. There's been a mistake. Our pool was just refilled and chemically balanced 4 days ago. Let me check our records, the voice replied. Ah yes, Sunnyside. We received multiple reports of unauthorized chemical additives turning swimmers purple, followed by outbreak reports of, let's see, clipboarditis? That can't be right. Karen's blood pressure soared. This is sabotage. Your department is being manipulated by terrorists. There was a pause on the line. Ms. Whitfield, this is Diane Peters, from across the street. The phone nearly slipped from Karen's hand. This isn't. The real health department knows nothing about this, Diane continued calmly, but they will if you don't stand down. Charlie has documented every bylaw you've broken, every unauthorized fee you've collected, and every non-resident you've allowed to use facilities paid for by our HOA dues. Karen was speechless, a historically unprecedented state. We have a proposition for you, Diane continued. The tape comes down, your documentation mysteriously reappears, and we all forget about the fraudulent assessment letters if you return the pool to the community and end your swim academy immediately. Karen's mind raced through her options. She could escalate further, but she was running out of tactics that wouldn't result in actual legal consequences. Brad had already warned her that their homeowner's insurance wouldn't cover her business activities. I need time to consider, Karen finally said. You have until 3 p.m., Diane replied. After that, we take everything we have to the actual authorities. As Karen hung up, she noticed something she'd missed before. Dozens of residents had gathered beyond the caution tape, watching silently. Not just Charlie and Diane's allies, but families with children clutching pool toys, seniors in their swimming attire, teenagers with their friends, all the people she'd displaced with her aquatic coupe. For the first time, Karen saw the community not as an unruly mass requiring her governance, but as individuals whose summer she had hijacked. Something unfamiliar stirred in her chest. It felt uncomfortably like shame. But Karen Whitfield didn't surrender easily. She retreated to her home to formulate her final stand, unaware that the neighborhood had already prepared for her potential refusal. Phase 4, the nuclear auction, was ready to deploy. At precisely 2:59 p.m., 1 minute before Diane's deadline, Karen marched back to the pool area with a document in hand. The crowd of residents had grown, with some bringing lawn chairs to witness the showdown. Charlie and Diane stood at the front, arms crossed. Karen cleared her throat. After careful consideration of community feedback, I've drafted a compromise solution that benefits all stakeholders. She unfolded her document, revealing a new schedule that still allocated 70% of pool hours to her swim academy, though she had generously expanded resident swim time to 3 hours daily. Additionally, Karen continued, raising her voice over the growing murmurs of disapproval, I'm establishing a Sunnyside Pool Committee, which I will chair, naturally, to oversee all aquatic decisions moving forward. Charlie stepped forward. That's not a compromise, Karen. That's just a slightly less dictatorial version of what you were already doing. Take it or leave it, Karen replied, her smile tight. You have 30 seconds to decide before I call my attorney. The bluff might have worked if Brad hadn't chosen that exact moment to arrive home from work early, pulling into their driveway in full view of the assembled crowd. Deanne smiled. You mean that attorney? She called out, pointing to Brad. Your husband already spoke with us this morning. He's the one who suggested the 3 p.m. deadline. Karen whipped around to stare at Brad, who averted his eyes and became intensely interested in retrieving his briefcase from the passenger seat. Brad? Karen's voice cracked. You were talking to them? Brad approached slowly, looking both terrified and determined. Honey, this has gone too far. You've been breaking actual laws. I'm a corporate compliance officer. I can't be associated with this. Associated with what? Karen demanded. Building something successful? Showing initiative? Brad looked pained. Karen, you forged official HOA documents. You're operating an illegal business. You've excluded homeowners from using the amenities they pay for. And last night, you started researching how to remove chlorine test strips from the pool inspection kit so it would fail county inspection. The crowd gasped. Karen's face flushed crimson. You went through my browser history? I didn't have to, Brad replied quietly. You left it up on our shared iPad, just like you left your false assessment letters in the printer. It was the betrayal Karen hadn't anticipated. She had prepared for community resistance, even legal challenges, but not for her own husband to side with the enemy. Her clipboard slipped from her fingers, clattering on the concrete, a sound that seemed to echo the collapse of her authority. Charlie stepped forward, his voice surprisingly gentle. Karen, no one's going to pursue this legally if you just return the pool to normal operations and refund the assessment money you've collected. Karen looked from face to face in the crowd. These were people she'd seen daily for months, yet she'd never actually spoken to most of them except to enforce her rules. She didn't know their names or stories, what they actually wanted from their community pool. For a woman whose power had always come from systems, structures, and control, this sudden human connection was overwhelming. Her carefully constructed reality was crumbling, and with it, her certainty. I just wanted to make things better, she whispered, but even to her own ears, the words sounded hollow. Brad placed a hand on her shoulder. I know, honey, but maybe it's time to ask people what better means to them. The moment hung in the air, Karen Whitfield, self-appointed pool dictator, at her breaking point. The neighborhood held its collective breath. Would Hurricane Karen finally dissipate, or would she surge back with even greater fury? 3 weeks later, the Sunnyside Estates community pool was unrecognizable, not because of any physical changes, but because of the atmosphere. Children splashed freely in the shallow end. Seniors conducted their arthritis water aerobics without clipboards or fee collections. Teenagers cannonballed into the deep end without receiving laminated citations. And in a corner lounge chair, wearing oversized sunglasses and a floppy hat as if in disguise, sat Karen Whitfield, quietly reading a novel. The Great Pool Compromise, as it came to be known, had been reached after 4 hours of intense negotiation in the clubhouse. Karen had ultimately surrendered her swim academy aspirations after Brad pulled her aside for what neighbors described as the most intense whispered argument in human history. In exchange for immunity from any legal action and the destruction of all evidence Charlie had collected, Karen agreed to return all collected assessment fees, dismantle her unauthorized business, and most painfully, resign from all self-appointed neighborhood positions for a cooling-off period of 6 months. What no one expected, however, was what came next. Mind if I join you? Charlie asked, approaching Karen's isolated lounge chair. Karen looked up, startled. No one had voluntarily spoken to her in weeks except Brad and the checkout personnel at Target. It's a free pool, she replied stiffly. The sign-in sheet has been abolished, as I'm well aware. Charlie sat down anyway. The kids miss your swimming lessons, you know. Karen blinked. What? You're actually a good teacher, Charlie admitted. Mason Kessler wouldn't put his face in the water for 3 summers before your class. Now his mom says they can't get him out of the bath. Oh, Karen said, genuinely surprised. In her shame and defeat, it hadn't occurred to her that any aspect of her pool takeover had been positive. The board's been talking, Charlie continued. The real board, not your shadow government. Karen winced. I deserve that. We're considering adding actual swimming lessons as a community benefit, Nothing fancy, just weekend mornings open to residents only, funded by Hillwood Dues. Karen closed her book. Why are you telling me this? Because we need an instructor, Charlie said simply. Someone who knows what they're doing. Someone with certification. Someone organized enough to maintain proper records. You want me to teach swimming? After everything? Charlie shrugged. Community's about second chances, isn't it? Besides, you'd be working within the system this time, not bulldozing it. The idea was appealing. Karen could feel her inner clipboard wielder stirring, but suspicion lingered. Why would you trust me again? I don't entirely, Charlie admitted. That's why there'd be oversight. A real committee. With other people who get equal votes. Karen considered this. Sharing power was a foreign concept, but so was sitting alone while life happened around her. The past weeks of isolation had been educational, if painful. I'd need to maintain certain standards, she said cautiously. We'd expect nothing less, Charlie replied. Just no more purple pool water or false documents. For the first time in nearly a month, Karen smiled. It was small and rusty from disuse, but genuine. I'd like to propose quarterly pool safety seminars as well, she ventured. Completely optional, of course. We could discuss it at the committee meeting, Charlie said, standing. Tuesday at 7 if you're interested. As he walked away, Karen felt something she hadn't experienced since moving to Sunnyside. Possibility without control. The sensation was terrifying, but also somehow freeing. That evening, she dug her water safety manuals out from the garage where Brad had diplomatically suggested she store her pool memorabilia. She began making notes, not rules this time, but ideas, suggestions, options for group consideration. The following Tuesday, Karen arrived at the clubhouse 5 minutes early, carrying a slim folder rather than her infamous clipboard. Neighbors greeted her with cautious nods instead of fearful scattering. As the meeting began, Karen raised her hand rather than interrupting. Yes, Karen, said Arnold, looking nervous. I'd like to propose a community splash day, she said, to inaugurate the new swim program, if approved by the committee, of course. Diane exchanged surprised glances with Charlie. That sounds fun, Arnold said carefully, as if suspecting a trap. It could be, Karen agreed, surprising even herself with the realization that she meant it. The water balloon attack that had started it all came full circle 6 weeks later when Karen herself filled the first balloon at the inaugural Sunnyside Splash Fest. As she handed water,